What if I told you there are lessons so brutal that once you learn them, you'll never see life the same way again? Not in school, not in books. These are truths the world tries to hide from you. Have you ever wondered why some people can't be fooled, can't be manipulated, and always seem 2 steps ahead? It's because they've embraced a kind of wisdom that feels dangerous. Most people cling to comforting illusions to feel safe. But if you dare to shatter those illusions, you gain something far more valuable: clarity, power, and a mind that no one can deceive. There are ruthless lessons about life that, once absorbed, make you dangerously smart. This isn't the polished intelligence schools test you on. This is raw, unforgiving wisdom, the kind that strips away illusions and forces you to see the world as it truly is. Most people run from these lessons because they are uncomfortable. They want to believe life is fair, that everyone is good at heart, and that hard work will always guarantee success. But reality is far harsher. Once you understand these truths, you become dangerous, not because you harm others, but because you cannot be deceived, controlled, or blinded by naive expectations. You begin to see reality without filters, and that clarity gives you a tremendous edge over those still lost in their comfortable dreams. Let me be clear. This isn't about turning you ruthless toward people. It's about becoming ruthless with your own illusions. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful emperor of Rome, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He knew that true intelligence lies in seeing things as they are, not as you wish them to be. The Stoics mastered this kind of dangerous intelligence. They studied human nature so deeply that betrayal never shocked them, disappointment never surprised them. They expected it, prepared for it, and moved forward unshaken. Ordinary intelligence helps you solve problems when they appear. But dangerous intelligence? It lets you see the storm before the first drop of rain falls. It reveals what people truly want, what they're really doing, and why they behave the way they do. Today, I'll share 8 ruthless lessons that will sharpen your mind like a blade. The 6th one alone will forever change how you view every person in your life. These are not comfortable truths, but once you master them, you'll gain the kind of mental clarity and strategic wisdom that most people never even glimpse. So let me ask you, are you ready to become dangerously intelligent? Lesson number 1. Most people are ruled by their emotions, not by logic. And once you understand this, you hold an enormous advantage in every interaction. The truth is, the vast majority make decisions driven by fear, desire, pride, or insecurity, and only later use logic to justify choices they already made emotionally. I once saw this unfold at a family dinner. My cousin proudly announced he was buying a $60,000 truck. His father immediately questioned the decision. Was it wise financially? My cousin launched into reasons. It holds its value. I need it for work. It's more reliable than my current car. But I could see what was really happening. The truck wasn't about practicality. It was about how it made him feel. Successful, powerful, important. Logic was simply window dressing for an emotional choice. His father attacked the logic, pointing out that he worked in an office, that a simple sedan would do the job, that the payments would crush his budget. But none of that mattered, because the decision had already been made in his heart, not in his head. The argument dragged on for nearly an hour, but in truth, my uncle was fighting the wrong battle. He kept hammering at the logic, pointing out financial risks, questioning the need. But my cousin wasn't really thinking about transportation at all. He wasn't weighing pros and cons with reason. What he was defending, what he was married to, was the way that shiny new truck made him feel about himself. Marcus Aurelius understood this principle centuries ago. In his writings, he often drew a sharp line between emotional reactions and rational responses. He observed that most people are enslaved by their immediate feelings. anger, fear, pride, desire, while the wise person learns to step back, to watch emotions without being dragged under by them. He famously wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Notice, he didn't say emotions are evil. Quite the opposite. Emotions are signals, a kind of inner compass, pointing us toward what matters most. Anger reveals where we feel wronged. Fear shows us what we value. Excitement exposes what we long for. But the Stoics understood something deeper. If you let emotions alone dictate your choices, regret almost always follows. Decisions that acknowledge emotions but are not ruled by them tend to be wiser, steadier, and far more effective. This is where dangerous intelligence begins, by recognizing this pattern everywhere. In arguments, people rarely defend pure facts. More often, they are defending their pride, their comfort, or their identity. When someone bristles at criticism of their daily $7 latte, are they really defending caffeine? Of course not. They are protecting the tiny luxury that makes them feel in control of their life. When coworkers push back against new procedures, they may not truly be rejecting efficiency. They may just feel threatened, overlooked, or unheard. The moment you understand what emotion is actually driving someone's stance, the entire conversation changes. Instead of attacking my cousin's logic, imagine if I had said, "That's a beautiful truck. You must feel proud driving something that reflects your success." By acknowledging the emotional need, the desire for status, recognition, self-worth, I would have opened a space where rational discussion could breathe. This is the essence of Stoic practice, cultivating the pause between the emotional spark and the outward reaction. Picture this: anger rising in your chest, fear tightening your breath, or excitement pushing you to rush forward. In that moment, ask yourself, what exactly am I feeling right now? And is it helping me think clearly about this situation? That single question creates a pocket of space. And in that space, wisdom has room to speak. Epictetus, another Stoic master, taught that we cannot control what happens to us, but we always retain the power to choose our response. Most people fail at this. They react emotionally first and then carry the weight of regret later. Dangerous intelligence means flipping that order, pausing, responding thoughtfully, and rarely regretting afterward. And once you begin to see through this lens, you realize emotional manipulation is everywhere, subtle, persistent, and often invisible to those still blinded by it. But now we move to something even deeper, something that lies at the root of nearly all human behavior. Lesson number 2. People will always act in their own self-interest. This isn't cynicism, it's reality. And once you accept it, you protect yourself from both manipulation and heartbreak. Every person acts according to what they believe will serve their best interest, even when on the surface it looks selfless. Understanding this truth doesn't make you bitter. It makes you clear-eyed about human motivation, sharper in judgment and better at predicting outcomes. I learned this lesson from my neighbor, Sarah. To everyone, she seemed like the model of generosity. She baked cookies for new families, organized block parties, volunteered for the Homeowners Association. Her name was on every sign-up sheet, her smile at every doorstep. The whole neighborhood praised her kindness and spirit of community, and for a time, so did I. Until the truth revealed itself. Sarah wasn't just being kind, she was preparing. She was quietly building a reputation, planting seeds, remembering names, asking about children's schools, listening carefully to complaints about traffic and property values. When election season rolled around, it all made sense. She was running for city council. Every selfless act had been a calculated investment in goodwill, a campaign strategy disguised as generosity. The result? When she needed support, she had an entire network ready to stand by her, not just as voters, but as people who genuinely believed she cared for them. And in a way she did, but it was her own self-interest guiding the wheel the entire time. Her generosity seemed real enough. The cookies, the volunteer hours, the friendly check-ins, they all brought genuine benefit to those around her. And yes, people truly did gain from her efforts, but was her motivation pure selflessness? Not quite. What really drove her was intelligent self-interest. Once I recognized that, I could admire her strategy without feeling deceived by it. Even Marcus Aurelius, sitting at the height of power as Emperor of Rome, understood this principle perfectly. He once wrote, "In the morning when thou risest unwillingly, let this thought be present. I am rising to the work of a human being." On the surface, it looks like a call to duty, but beneath it lies a subtle truth. His service to the empire also served himself. By living with virtue, by fulfilling his role as a just leader, he secured what every Stoic valued: the integrity of his soul and the legacy of being remembered as righteous. His self-interest was not greed. It was aligned with his values. This is why the Stoics taught that self-interest is not inherently evil. It is natural, and when guided properly, it can even become virtuous. Epictetus explained that if you understand people's motivations clearly, you can work with human nature rather than against it. To fight self-interest is like trying to fight gravity, pointless, exhausting, and ultimately impossible. So where does dangerous intelligence come in? It comes from asking the right question. What does this person really want from this situation? Think about it. When a coworker offers to help with your project, yes, maybe they genuinely want to assist, but maybe they also want to learn your process, gain credit for success, or build goodwill for future favors. Understanding these hidden layers of motivation doesn't make you cynical. It makes you prepared. And preparation prevents disappointment. When someone puts their own priorities ahead of yours, when they cancel plans, break promises, or make choices that appear selfish, you won't be shocked or hurt. You'll know it's not personal. It's simply human nature unfolding. The real skill lies in alignment. Instead of expecting people to act against their own interests, learn to structure things so that helping you also helps them. When your goals and theirs overlap, cooperation becomes natural and sustainable. This is how true partnerships are built, not on one-sided sacrifice, but on mutual benefit. Seneca himself practiced this wisdom in both business and politics. He understood that lasting cooperation did not come from demanding selflessness. It came from designing relationships where everyone had something to gain. That's why self-interest explains more human behavior than almost anything else. But here's where it gets more uncomfortable. Our third lesson is this: most people cannot handle the truth about themselves, and that is exactly why honest feedback is so rare, and why so many people stay trapped in the same destructive patterns for years. Most people build thick walls of mental defense against anything that threatens their self-image. They surround themselves with friends, colleagues, even family members who echo their beliefs and protect their illusions, rather than challenge them to grow. I saw this firsthand with my friend Mike. He constantly complained about being overlooked for promotions at work. Day after day, he ranted about unfair bosses, toxic office politics, and how hard work was no longer valued. But when I gently suggested another possibility, that maybe his own habits were playing a role, like showing up late, missing deadlines, and arguing with supervisors, his reaction was immediate. He grew defensive, almost offended. "You don't understand the situation," he snapped. "My boss just has it out for me." Every observation I offered was met with an excuse. Chronic lateness? That was traffic. Missed deadlines? Unrealistic expectations. Arguments with supervisors? He claimed it was because he stood up for what was right. It was never his fault, at least not in his eyes. And that's the very problem. Mike had built a story for himself, a story where he was always the victim of forces outside his control. In his mind, traffic, bosses, and unfair rules were to blame. Admitting responsibility for his own role would have meant something far heavier, acknowledging not only that he had contributed to his problems, but also that he had the power to change them. And strangely, that truth is harder to face. It is psychologically much easier to point fingers at the world than to turn the mirror toward yourself. Marcus Aurelius lived the exact opposite way. In his private writings, never meant for anyone else, he practiced relentless self-examination. Day after day, he questioned his motives, admitted his mistakes, and searched for ways to sharpen his character. He once wrote, "How much trouble he avoids, who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but only to what he does himself." The lesson is piercing. The wisest growth doesn't come from comparing yourself to others, but from confronting your own weaknesses without excuses. The Stoics understood this truth deeply. They saw self-deception as a kind of slavery. After all, how can you change what you refuse to acknowledge? Dangerous intelligence comes from this clarity, because when you see how easily people deceive themselves, you can predict their blind spots, their defensive reactions, even the excuses they'll use. You start to recognize patterns. The person who always blames circumstances isn't ready to change. The one who surrounds themselves with yes men isn't seeking growth. They're protecting their ego. And you'll notice it in their words. "That's just how I am." Or, "You don't understand my situation." The excuses may vary, but the theme is the same: defense over development. The Stoic answer to this weakness was simple but brutal: constant self-examination. Ask yourself, what truth about myself am I avoiding? What feedback am I dismissing too quickly? Where might I be deceiving myself? These questions are not comfortable. They cut deep. But without them, there is no real change. Only repetition of the same mistakes under new disguises. Seneca once wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Growth always demands an ending of the easy lies we tell ourselves about why we are the way we are. Brutal honesty is painful, but it's also liberating. If you can look at yourself without illusions, without the armor of excuses, you hold the rare power to grow. So let me challenge you. If you've begun to practice this kind of ruthless self-honesty, write ruthless truth in the comments below. You may inspire someone else who is still wrestling with their own illusions. Because the reality is this: self-deception keeps most people weak, predictable, and stuck. And that brings us to our fourth lesson. What happens when your growth threatens other people's illusions? Lesson number 4. Your success will make some people hate you. The higher you climb, the more people will look for ways to pull you back down. And it rarely has anything to do with you personally. Success itself inevitably creates hostility, not because you've done wrong, but because your achievements force others to confront their own unfulfilled potential. Understanding this prepares you for the hostility that will surely come and keeps you from taking it personally. I saw this play out in the life of my college roommate, David. Back in school, he was loved by everyone. Funny, generous, always willing to help with assignments. But once he launched his tech company and his face began showing up in local business magazines, the air shifted. Old friendships soured. What once was support slowly turned into resentment. As David's success grew, the reaction around him shifted. People who once laughed with him, studied with him, and shared meals began to change their tone. Some made sly remarks about how money had changed him, or whispered that his timing was just a stroke of luck. When he offered to pick up the check at dinner instead of gratitude, there were awkward jokes. Let the rich guy cover it. Former friends even started spreading stories that he'd always been arrogant, that he thought he was better than everyone else. None of it was true, and that was the most painful part. David hadn't changed at all. He was still the same generous, hard-working man who pulled all-nighters to help friends with assignments and stayed humble despite building something impressive. The difference wasn't in him. It was in how others now saw themselves reflected in his success. His achievements acted like a mirror, forcing them to confront their own unfulfilled dreams, their own excuses. Instead of seeing proof that success was possible, they felt accused by it. If David could make it happen, what did that say about their own choices? Marcus Aurelius lived with this same reality on a much larger scale. As emperor, even though he ruled with philosophy and justice at the core of his decisions, resentment and hostility surrounded him. He endured constant criticism, secret plots and betrayals from those envious of his position. Yet his writings show his resilience. He reminded himself, "Remember that very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." The Stoics understood that envy is one of the most destructive human emotions. Why? Because envy blinds people to their own growth. It turns attention outward, obsessing over what others have, instead of inward, toward personal improvement. And when people see your success, they are left with only two choices. Use it as fuel to become better themselves, or tear you down to feel more comfortable with their position. Dangerous intelligence means you learn to spot this pattern before it blindsides you. The more you accomplish, the more you should expect certain relationships to shift. Friends who cheered for you when you were struggling may sour when you begin to thrive. This isn't a reflection of your worth, it's a revelation of theirs. You'll notice it in subtle ways. Gossip meant to minimize your effort, rumors that your achievements came from luck, connections, or circumstance rather than discipline and skill. You'll hear phrases like, "must be nice," or "I could do that if I had his advantages." These words are not about you. They are shields people use to protect themselves from uncomfortable truths. The Stoic response is clear. Stay rooted in your character regardless of how others react. Don't shrink your light to make others comfortable, but don't flaunt it in arrogance either. Continue to grow, to contribute, to refine yourself. That is where true security lies. Seneca embodied this principle. Even when facing exile, betrayal, and the constant dangers of Roman politics, he continued to build influence, wealth, and wisdom. He knew that success would always bring both admiration and hatred, but neither admiration nor hatred should dictate your actions. Success itself creates predictable enemies, and that leads us to lesson number 5. Everyone is trying to sell you something. Once you see this, you'll never look at interactions the same way again. Every conversation, every gesture, every meeting carries some form of persuasion. Someone is always nudging you toward buying a product, accepting an idea, offering validation, giving attention, or making a commitment. Recognizing this constant influence is what frees you. It allows you to make conscious choices instead of drifting under unconscious manipulation. I realized this during what I thought was just a casual coffee with an old high school acquaintance, Jenny. She reached out after years of silence. She asked about my work, remembered small details from our past, and seemed genuinely happy to reconnect. I felt good, like I had rediscovered an old friend. From that moment with Jenny, the truth became clear. What seemed like a warm reunion was, in fact, a sales pitch. About 30 minutes into our conversation, she shifted gears seamlessly. With a smile, she said, "You know, I've been thinking about professionals like you who are doing so well in their careers. I'm working with this incredible company that helps people build passive income streams." In an instant, the entire interaction reframed itself. What I thought was a friendly catch-up revealed itself as a carefully constructed approach for her multi-level marketing scheme. Jenny wasn't evil, nor was she coldly manipulative. She genuinely believed she was offering me an opportunity. But every question about my job, every compliment about my success, every nostalgic story, each piece had been laying the groundwork for that moment. The friendship was simply the wrapping paper. The real product she wanted me to buy into was her business pitch. Marcus Aurelius faced this reality on a much larger stage. Surrounded by advisors, generals, and politicians, all pushing their own agendas, he reminded himself, "Be like the rocky headland on which the waves constantly break. It stands firm, and round it the seething waters are laid to rest." He understood a timeless truth. Everyone who approached him wanted something, and clarity about their true motivations was essential for wise decisions. This awareness doesn't make you paranoid, it makes you thoughtful. Think about it. When your coworker praises your project, yes, they may genuinely admire your work, but perhaps they also want your support for their proposal in the next meeting. When your neighbor shows up with cookies, yes, they may be friendly, but perhaps they also hope you'll agree to water their plants while they're away. The heart of dangerous intelligence is to pause and ask, what is this person really trying to get me to do, to think, or to feel? This perspective doesn't poison relationships. It clarifies them. It allows you to separate genuine kindness from hidden agendas without cynicism. And once you see it, the world around you becomes more transparent. Epictetus taught that we must examine our judgments carefully and never accept appearances at face value. For the Stoics, clear thinking mattered more than superficial pleasantness. That's why once your eyes open to this, you begin recognizing patterns everywhere. The friend who only calls when they need help. The family member who brings up a sensitive subject just before asking for a favor. The colleague who agrees with everything you say until it's time to pitch their own idea. These aren't necessarily manipulative villains. They are simply humans, pursuing their interests through social interaction. But the protection comes from choice. When you see what someone is selling, you can decide consciously whether to buy, based not on their persuasion, but on whether it truly aligns with your own interests. Once you recognize these constant influence attempts, they become almost impossible to miss. And this awareness naturally leads us into a darker but even more crucial truth about human nature. Lesson number 6. People will show you who they are. Believe them. This lesson has the power to change how you view every relationship in your life, and it will save you from countless disappointments. Because the truth is, people consistently reveal their character in the smallest ways, in casual comments, in little actions, in how they treat those they consider unimportant. Most of us ignore these signals, clinging instead to the comforting hope that others are better than they appear. But that misplaced optimism only guarantees disappointment. I learned this the hard way with my business partner, Alex. In our first few months working together, there were subtle warning signs I brushed aside. He took just a bit more credit than he deserved in client meetings. He padded his expense reports with questionable charges. He made promises to team members that he conveniently forgot or quietly ignored. Looking back, I realize I had ignored every red flag. Each time Alex did something questionable, I found a way to excuse it. When he exaggerated his contributions in meetings, I told myself, he's just passionate about the business. When I noticed luxury hotel charges on what was supposed to be a one-day client trip, I rationalized. Everyone pads their expense reports a little. And when employees complained about his broken promises, I softened it by saying, he's just busy and forgets things sometimes. But 2 years later, the truth hit me like a hammer. I discovered that Alex had been secretly negotiating to sell our company without my knowledge, planning to keep all the profit for himself. And in that moment, I realized something painful. The warning signs had been there from the very beginning. His behavior was consistent. The problem wasn't that he had hidden his character, it was that I had refused to see it. Maya Angelou once said, "When people show you who they are, believe them the first time." Marcus Aurelius echoed the same principle in his writings. He emphasized that we should judge people not by their words or by occasional acts of goodness, but by the patterns they reveal over time. Character isn't defined by isolated incidents. It's revealed through repetition. The Stoics valued truth over hope when it came to assessing people. They knew that most individuals don't fundamentally change who they are. They don't suddenly become dishonest, selfish, or unreliable. They've always been that way. It just becomes clearer as circumstances shift and pressures mount. Dangerous intelligence comes from understanding this. You can predict someone's future behavior simply by studying their present patterns. Think about it. The person who routinely treats service workers with disrespect will one day treat you the same way, once they believe you can't offer them anything. The one who casually breaks small promises will eventually break big ones. The friend who gossips about others when they're not around will gossip about you the second you leave the room. The signals are always there, small cracks in the mask that reveal the face beneath. Watch carefully. How someone handles money when no one is watching. How they speak about people who can't benefit them. Whether they keep commitments when it's inconvenient. How they react when things don't go their way. And above all, whether their words consistently align with their actions. These are the clues to character. Seneca warned often about this truth. He wrote about the importance of choosing companions with care, because whether we admit it or not, we gradually become like the people we spend our time with. Hoping someone will magically change their nature, he said, is a losing strategy. The wiser path is far more ruthless. Trust patterns over promises, consistency over excuses, and actions over words. If someone shows you that they are unreliable, selfish, or dishonest, even in small ways, believe them. Adjust your expectations accordingly. Don't build trust on wishful thinking. Build it on evidence. So here's my challenge to you. If you've learned to pay attention to consistent patterns rather than empty promises, type "believe the patterns" in the comments below. It will remind others that character is revealed by actions, not by words. Because the truth is, character patterns predict future behavior with frightening accuracy. And this leads us straight into our 7th lesson. Comfort is the enemy of growth. The moment you grow too comfortable, you start dying, intellectually, emotionally, even spiritually. Comfort zones are nothing more than psychological prisons disguised as safety. Real strength, wisdom, and resilience can only grow through challenge, discomfort, and facing the things that at first seem difficult or impossible. I saw this clearly with my neighbor, Tom. He was a brilliant software engineer who seemed to have found the perfect job, excellent salary, flexible hours, the respect of his team, and tasks that came easily to him. For 3 years, he lived what most people would call the dream. Secure, comfortable, stress-free. But beneath that comfort, something dangerous was happening, and he didn't recognize it until it was almost too late. Tom's comfort, which once felt like success, slowly revealed its hidden danger. He began to notice his mind growing dull. Conversations that once energized him now felt draining, even boring. New technologies that should have sparked his curiosity instead left him feeling overwhelmed. It hit him. He hadn't truly learned or mastered anything challenging in years. What he thought was stability was, in truth, a trap. His comfort was softening him, making him mentally weaker and little by little professionally irrelevant. When his company downsized and cut his position, Tom finally saw the full cost of his complacency. In job interviews, he stumbled. He struggled to show recent growth, new skills, or evidence of ongoing development. Meanwhile, the industry had kept moving forward while he had stood still. The safety net he believed he had woven was, in reality, nothing more than vulnerability disguised as security. Marcus Aurelius understood this principle profoundly. As emperor, he could have indulged in luxury, comfort, and ease. Yet he deliberately chose hardship, military campaigns, rigorous philosophical practice, and constant self-discipline. He reminded himself, at dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work. As a human being. He knew that avoiding difficulty meant avoiding growth. The Stoics embraced this mindset by practicing voluntary discomfort. They slept on hard floors, ate the simplest foods, and intentionally placed themselves in situations that tested their limits. This wasn't about self-punishment. It was training, preparation for life's inevitable challenges. Dangerous intelligence comes from realizing what most people don't. While others flee, discomfort, and remain fragile, you can accelerate your own development by deliberately seeking challenges that stretch your capacity. Every intimidating skill, every daunting task, those are the very things that could transform your life once you master them. Comfort, more than failure, is the true killer of dreams. Because when you're too comfortable, you stop risking, stop learning, stop expanding. You become predictable, replaceable, and eventually, even boring to yourself. You'll see this everywhere. The professional who stops upgrading their skills and gets replaced by someone hungrier. The athlete who eases up in training and loses to competitors who still push their limits. The relationship that drifts into routine and dies, not from a fight, but from stagnation. Epictetus, who lived through both slavery and freedom, taught that we should see difficulties as opportunities to grow stronger in virtue. He reminded us that wealth is not measured by how many possessions you accumulate, but by how few desires you cling to. True wealth is not in things. It's in the ability to face whatever life throws at you with resilience. The Stoic practice is brutally practical. Regularly ask yourself, what am I avoiding just because it feels too hard? Which skills, if I develop them, would accelerate my growth? Where am I choosing safety instead of choosing growth? Comfort is the silent enemy that keeps most people weak, stagnant, and unprepared for change. And this leads us to our final lesson, the ultimate truth that puts everything in perspective. Lesson number 8, you are going to die, and most of your worries are meaningless. This is the sobering realization that strips away the noise of life. Death is the one certainty, and if you truly accept it, most of your daily anxieties about approval, setbacks, petty conflicts will vanish like smoke. With mortality in focus, you gain dangerous clarity about what actually matters and what merely feels important. I learned this truth watching my uncle during his final months battling cancer. Before the diagnosis, his days were filled with the same trivial worries that consume so many of us. What people thought of his career choices, neighborhood gossip, whether his lawn looked as green as the neighbors, office politics, even endless arguments on social media. All the things that felt urgent. Yet in the face of death, none of them mattered. My uncle's diagnosis transformed his perspective overnight. For years, he had spent countless hours each week consumed with stress about things that, in the end, had no real bearing on the meaning of his life. But when faced with death, all of it vanished in an instant. Those anxieties melted away like fog dissolving under the morning sun. He stopped worrying about impressing people who never truly mattered. He ended relationships that drained his energy and brought him nothing but exhaustion. Instead of shallow conversations about the weather or last night's game, he began having deeper, heartfelt discussions with the people he loved. He focused only on what brought him joy and meaning. And the most striking part? The sheer amount of mental energy this freed up. Without the constant background noise of trivial anxieties, he became more present, more grateful, and ironically, happier than he had been in years. Even as he was living his final chapter, Marcus Aurelius understood this lesson profoundly. He practiced memento mori, remembering death, not to dwell morbidly on the end, but to gain clarity about how to live. He wrote, "It is not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to live." To him, the awareness of mortality wasn't a curse, it was a teacher. It stripped away distractions, cut through illusions, and forced attention onto what truly mattered: virtue, meaning, and presence. The Stoics saw death as the great clarifier. When you truly remember that your time is limited, you stop wasting it. You stop postponing important conversations. You stop delaying meaningful pursuits. You stop taking loved ones for granted. Dangerous intelligence is born here, because while most people are paralyzed by trivial anxieties, you gain the ability to focus entirely on what matters most. You begin making choices with urgency, based not on the illusion of unlimited time, but on the truth of limited time. You start investing energy into relationships and activities that will still matter when you look back at your life from its end. The clarity this brings is both brutal and liberating. That petty argument with your coworker about the meeting schedule? Meaningless. The anxiety about whether people liked your presentation? Pointless. The stress about keeping up with social media? Nothing but wasted energy. What does matter is different. The time you spend developing your character, building relationships of real depth, contributing something valuable to the world, and living in alignment with your principles. These are the things that endure. These are the things that define who you are and what you leave behind. Seneca put it plainly. Let us examine ourselves and rid ourselves of the faults we have acquired. He understood that death doesn't just end life. It gives urgency to self-improvement and meaning to our choices. The practice is to regularly ask yourself, if I had 1 year left, would this matter? Am I spending my time on things that align with my deepest values? What would I regret not doing? This final lesson transforms everything. It strips away meaningless anxieties and gives you laser-like focus on what truly matters in the short, precious time you have. Dangerous intelligence isn't about harming others. It's about protecting yourself. It's about making better decisions, focusing your energy, and choosing wisely. It's about being strong enough to face uncomfortable truths and wise enough to use them for good. The Stoics knew that most people live trapped in comforting illusions. Illusions that make them weak, predictable, and easily manipulated. But if you embrace these ruthless lessons, you join the rare few who see clearly and act wisely. So I'll leave you with this. If you're ready to develop this dangerous intelligence, like this video and subscribe for more Stoic wisdom. And in the comments, share which lesson struck you the hardest. Which truth did you need to hear most today? Remember, real power isn't about controlling others. Real power comes from seeing the truth clearly and then having the courage to act wisely.